been 3 years since we have this orchard in our backyard, and it's quite obvious because the home orchard, it's not for a commercial purpose. So why go about making such an effort to spend hours spraying our orchard? I know it's tedious and time consuming, but we feel like it's a necessity. But the real question is, why do we need a dormant spray? Here we're not talking about traditional or conventional orchard driven by industrial methods and processes. So the self-sustaining every orchard site, again, this is based on what I've seen in my own orchard, always gonna face an array of challenges. Disease cycles need to be understood, and that gonna determine which holistic mix best boosts plant defenses at a given point in the season. Again, and that's also the key, at a given point in the season. It's not always gonna be the same holistic mix each time. During the growing season, things needs to be tweaked. So it's not about getting rid of pests and diseases from a home orchard. It's not about that. It's not about that at all. It's more about helping trees and shrubs and ground covers and vines grow healthy fruit without chemical inputs and develop a self-sustaining, resilient orchard with no human intervention. So last couple of years, what we have noticed is the initial wake up and growth have been amazing. The apples, it's just been 3 years. This is our third year. Some of them, they're still 2 years old. The apples that we did harvest this year, they were much larger, excellent flavor with no codling moth or apple maggot. Blueberries, we had incredible increase in yield with total elimination of mummy berries that is rampant elsewhere. The apricot, awesome growth with some fruit on each tree each year. Roses, significantly reduced black spot disease which was previously uncontrolled. We have 8-10 varieties of English roses that we have in our backyard and front yard. So raspberries increased in size, yield, and they taste better. So strawberries, large and luscious with almost no fungal loss, and the list goes on and on and on. It's early December here in the Atlantic Southeast. 6:30 in the morning, the sky has cleared from the last night's rain and the weather seems to be perfect for the outside work. So after I hard pruned my trees over the early winter, which I finished just a day back, I walk around my backyard food forest early in the morning. So at first glance, it's hard to predict by just looking at the growth and size of a fruit tree or a fruiting bird whether we're going to get a harvest next year or it's just going to be a disaster like this year where we got overwhelmed by all sort of fungal and bacterial issues. It was a huge mess. Took us a while to wrap around our heads because of the plants that we lost from the fire blight. So right now we're looking at 2-year-old red skin peach tree which we planted in the spring of 2020. When we just walk around, we see a healthy tree that has been pruned using open center technique in height not more than 7 feet tall and around 12 feet in diameter. However, when we stare at it for just a few minutes and focus on the problems it could have, we then realize what it's lacking in terms of the care that we provided over the long season, or rather the care we failed to provide. So what I would do is I would always look for signs of peach borers during the winter. I would go and examine the tree for holes and sawdust mixed into the sap oozing from the tree trunk. These are the signs the peach tree is infested by peach borers, which look like metallic blue wasps in adult form. These peach tree borers, they lay eggs in the bark of peach trees. When the larvae start to dig beneath the bark, the peach tree starts leaking sap and sawdust. As you can see down here, right below the grafted union on the rootstock, there is definitely a sap oozing. So my first thought would be a peace tree borer, as they get active and more dynamic right after the wet and damp days and nights, which we had for a few days now. So what I would do is I'm using something else, but you could use a thin piece of wire like an unbent paper clip into the borer holes and try to skewer the larvae. Also, make sure to double check and trim back branches so that enough sunlight gets to the trunk and rootstock, which will then create less favorable conditions for the borer. Well, it's quite obvious just looking at it now that peace tree needs to be pruned open center. So now let's dig deeper into the holistic orchard spray, what it's composed of, how to use it, and what exactly to target. The use of pure neem oil and karanja oil on pasteurized liquid fish, seaweed, and a diverse complex of microbes achieves many things. This is primarily a nutritional brew for surface microbes and foliar uptake that also happens to stimulate the production of phytochemicals used by plants to ward off disease. Home orchard rates assumes a 4-gallon backpack sprayer, which is used to cover so many trees to the point of runoff. Also, what I would do is then add 2.5 ounces of pure neem oil with a generous teaspoonful of soap emulsifier, because the neem oil and karanja oil needs to be emulsified, and it doesn't matter how much oil concentration you want to achieve. 0.5 would be ideal, but I care less. And also 10 ounces of liquid fish, 6 ounces of effective microbes to the water filling the spray tank. Dissolve as much as half cup of blackstrap molasses in warm water to lunch those hungry critters. I not always, but during the dormant spray, use handful of surround kaolin clay. The backpack applications should also include 5 tablespoons. Well, it could be more than 5, but at least 5 of liquid kelp or half an ounce of the seaweed extract. So now let's dig deeper into the benefits. I'm not gonna go into detail, but just lay out the brief benefits, and based on what I have seen in my own food forest last few years, it's been a positive output. So the surround kaolin clay, besides protecting crops from the sunburn and heat stress damage, maybe up to 50-60%, it also promotes plant health. And what it does is it leads to more effective photosynthesis and higher yields under extreme conditions. So in my food forest, surround kaolin clay has had a positive result in preventing apple maggots, plum curculio, and oriental fruit moths. And plum and nectarines both had all of my plums, like all of my peaches and nectarines had plum curculio. I'm sorry, not plum, peaches and nectarines, and also had an oriental fruit moth. So neem and karanja oil is a nature fungicide and has helped prevent black spot. And then that was on my European plum. The fire blight in pears and apples, the peach leaf curl in peaches, cedar apple rust in early blooming apples, and black knots in Japanese and Asian plums. That's what it has helped in past. Not completely curing it, but more of a preventing it. They might occur again next spring, but it did help me in past. However, just remember to use neem oil, not too much outside dormancy, as I've seen it burning my Asian European pear leaves and trunks. I spread during the peak summer season. So during the peak summer season, if you happen to use neem oil, then do not use it in your pears, regardless whether they're Asian or European, because they burn leaves if it's too humid outside. Use karanja oil and very less as an alternative to neem oil. I use both at the same time, but then over the summer I don't use neem oil at all. Liquid fish emulsion feeds the soil, and arboreal food web, liquid kelp, promotes growth and helps stress. Trees adapt to stress. Molasses also feeds trees. Hand soap is used as a emulsifier. It helps emulsification the neem and karanja oil. After we are done spraying, we should always drain the spray immediately. The spray solution should never be allowed to remain in the spray boom lines overnight prior to flushing. The neem oil changes its state during the night when the temperature drops and the Bt kaolin clay gets harder and thick, which will then be a nightmare to have it removed. The mixture will thicken inside the tank, inlet filter, pump, hose, and nozzles, which will then lead to reduced pressure and spray performance. I use clean water to flush the tank, hoses, booms, and nozzles. The 4-gallon sprayer that I use has screens and filters which need to be inspected and cleaned prior to using them. If there are any visible deposits, they must be removed from the spraying system. Hoses, spray lines, and nozzles should be flossed for at least 1 minute with the cleaning solution. Pump, filter, and lines need to be drained at the end, and the complete system needs to be rinsed with clean water. This is a 2-year-old red skin peach tree which has never been sprayed in past. The same peach tree had a peach leaf curl its first year and was infested by a plum perculio the second. And this year, we have already noticed signs of a peach tree borer. So the goal here is to make sure the application covers the entire surface of branches and trunk. We will also make sure to not miss the undersides of branches. So always begin spraying at the top and middle of the tree and slowly move toward the outer branches. Cover the branches thoroughly so that they are dripping with the spray solution. Once the branches are covered completely, spray the trunk down to the ground and slowly move toward the rootstock. The infested section of a tree will require more effort.